Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a wonderful time in São Paulo, and like you, I'm also in this crossing from south to south in this travesía del sur, but in the opposite direction. I have the privilege and luck to be starting my PhD, accompanied and guided by my two supervisors, Marcos Mortensen-Stiegel and Welby Ings from Aotearoa, New Zealand. My name is Herbert Spencer. I'm a design professor and researcher who has been working in Valparaíso, Chile for the past 24 years. My ancestral roots are a mixed tapestry of Italian, English, and Chilote ancestry from the southern islands of Chile. I live by Los Aromos Reservoir, once Pelumpen estuary, at the foot of La Campana in Limache in the central part of Chile. I'm also the proud father of two artists, a 16-year-old illustrator and a 24-year-old musician. Since I was a child, I have been interested in painting. I'm captivated by the ability of visual language to create atmospheres, to transmit moods, and present different situations. One of my strongest influences is the Chilean artist Roberto Mata. His work revealed to me how painting can uncover or make visible what is hidden, in his case, the totems and archetypes, as he calls them, that both contain and govern us, those primal forces that shape our existence, he says. Mata taught me that visual language is not just about representation, it's a way to connect with something profound and universal. The poet Arthur Rimbaud articulated his quest in his letter of the seer to Paul Demeny, writing about a language from the soul to the soul. He proposed a methodical rearrangement of the senses to access a form of expression beyond words. His radical vision, emerging from his dissatisfaction with the limitations of traditional language, was to create a new bandwidth for communication that bypasses rational structures for a direct transmission of consciousness. Rimbaud proposed a form of communication that was direct, without intermediations, and capable of conveying the entirety of human experience. Rimbaud's long, immense, and reasoned rearrangement of the senses, as described in his letter, can be interpreted as a state of synesthetic alignment of perception, achieving a perfect click both between perceptions and emotions and between speaker and listener, where they seamlessly connect. The goal was to create a medium where thoughts, feelings, or experiences could be shared without the distortions of conventional language. Today, this idea of expanding communications bandwidth resonates deeply, especially in the pursuit of more inclusive and universal forms of expression. To illustrate this layered nature of meaning, let me remind you of this 100-year-old experiment conducted by Wolfgang Kohler, the Buba-Kiki effect, presented initially as Maluma and Taquete. When presented with these two shapes and asked which is Buba and which is Kiki, people across cultures consistently make the same associations. This reveals something remarkable about human cognition. Beneath our formal languages lies a deeper stratum of meaning where sound, shape, and sense converge. This primal perception level is more abstract, yet paradoxically more consistent across humanity. This points to what I aim to explore, a foundation for pictographic communication that taps into this pre-linguistic cross-sensory understanding. Here, we can converge in our fundamental comprehension while allowing for rich divergence in interpretation and expression. Communication exists in the space between people, not in the symbols, but in a shared context of understanding. This creates an inherent tension in design between the universal and the locally specific, between standardization and situated adaptation. The richness of the particular offers precision and depth, yet the need for universal standards persists to enable effective communication across diverse audiences. As designers, we are tasked with navigating this tension. How can we create communication tools that are universally accessible and deeply resonant on a personal and cultural level? In nature, we understand diversity as a reflection of an ecosystem's health. However, in the case of communication, uniformity and standards are what makes it possible. Divergence in sign language, for instance, can be seen in the difference between British and American Sign Language. Despite both countries sharing English as a spoken language, they are distinct and mutually unintelligible, illustrating how sign languages can evolve uniquely even among populations with a common spoken language. Historically, there have been numerous efforts to create universal languages to overcome the limitations of natural language and facilitate understanding between cultures. In the 17th century, Gottfried Leibniz envisioned the Caracteristica Universalis, a universal formal language capable of expressing mathematical, scientific, and metaphysical concepts. He aimed to create a language that could be used within universal logical calculus, overcoming the ambiguities inherent in natural language and facilitating human reasoning, much like a thread of Ariadne that could guide our thought. Again, in the 19th century, another mathematician, Gottlob Frege, created a formal language capable of expressing thought with precision, free from ambiguities, he said. He called it concept script or conceptual notation and laid the foundations for programming syntax. These universalist projects shared a vision to create a perfect language through logical and mathematical systematization. However, in 1931, Gödel's incompleteness theorem demonstrated something profound: the mathematical impossibility of making a formal system that is both complete and consistent at the same time, if it's complex enough to include basic logical operations or arithmetic in a purely mathematical context. This discovery challenged universal languages based on logical operations and rules. When we look back at these attempts to capture the complexity of language in logical structures, we might see them as somewhat naive, though their pursuit reveals something fundamental about our persistent desire to find universal ways of understanding each other. In 1925, almost 100 years ago, Otto Neurath developed the isotype system, a visual language aimed at conveying information more clearly than traditional text-based methods. This system addresses the ambiguities and limitations often found in verbal communication. Its primary objective was to enhance educational communication and improve the transmission of statistical information, making complex ideas more accessible to wider audiences. Pictographic language allows for greater flexibility in interpretation, effectively overcoming the challenges posed by rigid logical structures. Today, thanks to large language models or LLMs, we can generate and adapt the language in real time, creating a dynamic system that continuously responds to contextual inputs. This capability may enable us to manage the tension between universality and contextual adaptation, facilitating communication that is both broadly applicable and finely attuned to specific circumstances. Following a more Hegelian line of thought, I can say the particular is not merely subordinate to the universal, but constitutes a necessary moment in the development of concrete universality. This is a theoretical framework that proves essential for understanding how design solutions emerge from specific contexts while aspiring to broader applicability. In this light, Otto Neurath's work offers a compelling historical precedent. His pictographic approach aimed to democratize complex economic and cultural knowledge, believing that visual representation made content more accessible. In the 1980s, pictograms began to be systematically used within augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC, to help individuals with complex communication needs. However, these pictograms did not emerge from a design tradition, but from a therapeutic context, where pre-existing pictograms from other domains were adopted without a consistent approach to building a cohesive graphic system. The focus of AAC has remained primarily functional and practical, aimed at addressing basic needs such as requesting water or indicating the need to use the bathroom. In recent years, AAC systems have proliferated and diverged based on local needs, making them exclusive and ad hoc solutions. Also, learning to use these systems often involves significant training costs, and there are practically no open access resources. We need a language that allows us to converge in understanding so we may diverge in meaning, enabling individuals to appropriate it and express themselves effectively. This is why my research starts in the space of disability, in the realm of asymmetries. And from these asymmetries, I can establish connections with other spaces and contexts, ultimately working towards reducing these gaps. In 2016, I was invited to work on cognitive accessibility within an interdisciplinary research group with an advisory panel of adults with intellectual disabilities. Collaborating in this group profoundly transformed my understanding of communication design. Our advisory panel wasn't just a group of participants, they were experts by experience. They taught us that cognitive accessibility isn't merely about simplifying information. It's about making meaning visible and actionable. In this 2-year project, we designed a system to help people complete service transactions successfully called Pictos. Jointly with the advisory panel, we defined the information architecture that describes services, venues, and tasks or transactions, where every transaction has a number of steps. Each step, as a unit of support, consists of an instruction in plain language, an icon that reinforces the verb of the instruction, and a pictogram that represents the situation within the sequence. The pictogram, in turn, is constructed from the combination of 3 layers, where each layer is directly related to the verbal instruction of each step: the action, the element, and the context. Pictos is a visual and procedural support system for public services. It is a baseline for cognitive accessibility that works on your phone and can be accessed through signage installed on site or by opening the app pictos.cl. The project was grounded in a practice-based approach, incorporating co-creation sessions, iterative prototyping, and field testing. A critical insight from this inclusive research was that a practice-oriented approach naturally facilitated collaboration across multiple disciplines. Our contributions converged into concrete constructs or boundary objects that could be piloted, tested, and refined progressively. Even our field research tools, such as diaries and probes, evolved into the final Pictos outcome. Now, my current work seeks to expand on the lessons of Pictos by exploring the latent space between words and images, particularly the relationship between the space of the word as the instruction of a step and its morphological correspondence with the layers of the space of the image. At a more advanced level, pictogram generation could not be constrained to a rigid combinatory framework as in the systematic approaches I presented earlier. Instead, I would adapt precisely to the textual input while adhering to a predefined graphic logic. This approach would allow for a nuanced correspondence between word and image, reflecting the semantics of the phrase in a flexible but consistent visual form. This will be my language game. To achieve this, I intend to develop an AI model for generating pictograms from sentences. To an LLM, images are also texts, but the preference for vector graphics, such as SVG presented on the right, over bitmap images is crucial here, as vector graphics provide a more semantically rich and elegant format, allowing the system to describe images in terms of their component parts, much like a language. However, this shift towards integrating AI into this project also elevates the problem of the universal and the particular to a new meta level. On the one hand, personalization through AI could fragment our shared human experience, creating isolated silos of meaning, and over-standardization would lead to a significant loss of cultural nuances and richness. These scenarios highlight the importance of maintaining human agency and allowing reflection and feedback from these kinds of systems. AI can accommodate the imperfections and gaps, the inherent incompleteness of language. It is precisely in this openness that language finds renewal and vitality. This brings us to the core of my doctoral research, designing a visual communication system that leverages emerging technologies while preserving human agency. The goal isn't just to create another AAC tool, but to establish human-centered technological development principles that promote inclusion, individual autonomy, and collective understanding. The questions we face are answered through action, through the artifacts we build, and the collaborative processes we engage in. The explicitness of praxis makes us accessible to one another, making our purposes and aspirations visible. Thank you all for your attention, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with each one of you. Bye bye. Chao, chao. Nos vemos.